I should also say something a little more personal, and that is that for each of them and for me, our gratitude toward you is just enormous. You know, you really fill us in so many ways. You give us a sense of purpose and a reason for everything we do. And I don't think I can capture in words the gratitude we feel. We're also very grateful to leaders that we turn to. The chair of our board is Peter Robertson. The chair of the GPF's strategic board is Lorene Powell-Jobs. And they provide leadership, and their form of leadership really is permission. It's permission to do your very best for you. So I just want to express my personal sense of gratitude to everybody in the room, to the wider GPF community, to those partners like Humanity United and MasterCard and Gates and others who've just, they don't just support us financially. There are intellectual partners, there are thought partners. We feel they're with us. And then, Peter and Lorene are there with us in very much the same way. So thank you to Rockefeller. Thank you to each of the organizations, the Alumalo Foundation and others who've stood with us. We're closing now with just sort of a quick recap. I mean, as you remember, I opened by arguing that this was a period of tremendous opportunity, that economies are growing, that philanthropy is expanding and deepening, and that digital tools are really empowering, and there's a real sense of opportunity in that regard. But at the same time, there's just shocking need. That problems as acute and as appalling as slavery still persist. And so it's that combination of a sense of opportunity and profound need that leads us to the imperative of choice, right? We understand that all of these problems, many of the problems we can think of, and as well as their solutions, are going to be a function of millions of individual choices that are made, including by us, right? But millions of individual choices. And so I thought we'd end this conference in two ways. First, by asking those who led the working groups, those deliberations, to come forward and tell us a word about the key conclusions that were drawn, those forks of choice that they want to call our attention to. And then turn to three remarkable stars and leaders in our lives, who I will introduce after, but who will speak to the power of choice as well. But can we start with Heather Grady of Rockefeller Foundation? Heather co-created and led and moderated these sessions on both the plenary and the working group sessions on food security, sustainable agriculture. And I believe for purposes of taping, we need you right there, yes.
I'm sorry, my mother and my grandmother taught me never to turn my back to anyone, so I apologize to the four of you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. We had two great problem-solving sessions linked to the conference themes of agriculture and nutrition, or as we might say, feeding more and feeding us better with less. More careful use of inputs, safer food, and above all, higher returns to farmers. We had some great, I won't call them speakers, they were thought starters: Tim Hanstead, Linda Kwamboka, Trevor Tompkins, Stephanie Hansen, Chris Richards, and Jake Harriman. They were just great. On Monday, our session focused on connecting farmers to markets. We looked specifically at how philanthropy can fill the gaps between policy and practice, and how to affect real change at the farm level and then get that increased productivity into markets. There was a strong emphasis on the need to build institutional capacity and organizational development. We acknowledge the real importance of land rights and policies that unlock productivity when people have secure land tenure, especially women. We need more support going to education, enterprise skills, entrepreneurship, and financial literacy for farmers and farmer organizations. The organizations that we heard from are doing a lot on training farmers to operate as businesses and providing needed inputs. But while there's interest in bringing more impact investments to rural areas, there don't seem to be enough managers or investment-ready businesses. organizations who want support in the form of equity or loans are going to have to answer the question, what's your revenue model? That was asked again and again, if they want more than grants. And we covered the importance of innovations in reducing waste, energy, and water. Yesterday, we focused on technological solutions that increase food production, but also maximize safety and environmental sustainability. That was the second problem-solving session. We acknowledged that this is in the area of technology and agriculture. It's often a contested area. So how can philanthropy fill that gap between the need for innovation and the very complex reality on the ground? Just a few highlights. Above all, we have to be adaptive. We may focus on the same set of problems, hunger, lack of access to inputs and credit, but the differences will really remain on the ground, and organizations that understand the local context are very important. We know that increasing productivity does not necessarily increase incomes for farmers, so how can that make a difference? We need to give poor communities choices, but also be aware of national or global standards that are there to protect against risk. We talked about breast milk substitutes and how we can expand access to new kinds of food, but be aware of global standards. And finally, other ethical issues. There's an increasingly concentrated global food supply chain. There are middlemen in agriculture. How do we make sure that we pay attention to those issues? And finally, philanthropy sometimes veers away from public policies, but public policies are critical to agriculture, that enabling environment into which we want to provide support. So those were just some of the highlights. There was great interest in agriculture. Jane, we hope you keep it on the program for next year.
Thank you. Randy Newcomb of Humanity United co-created and managed the sessions on modern-day slavery.
Thank you, Jane. We enjoyed really two very well-attended and spirited working group sessions following the panel during the plenary session. I think actually my favorite picture during the first panel was to see Peter Buffett. Actually, the room was completely sold out. We had people knocking on the doors, and there was Peter Buffett sitting on the floor with his back up against the wall, just so he could participate in the session. So I thoroughly enjoyed. There was lots of interest in this work. Along with a room full of participants who were lively in their participation, we enjoyed guidance from some key practitioners and leaders from the Novo Foundation, Benetech, USC, Harvard, the folks at Thorn, Slavery Footprint, Businesses for Social Responsibility, the Global Freedom Center, and it was a pleasure to have Ambassador Louis C. DeBaca from the State Department representing the government with us. This track was definitely made up of a cross-section and a slice of public sector, social sector, and civil society members who were coming to show leadership. Jane, the past 3 days have drawn out for me a theme in a book that I'm currently reading by David Weinberger entitled Too Big to Know. Weinberger explores the evolution of knowledge from sole domain experts and single thought leaders into knowledge that is held by and among networks. And this is David's argument. He says, the smartest person in the room is the room. And I love this picture because this really talks about and kind of explains the complexities of these issues that we face. Perhaps, if ever that was true, it's true in this work on human trafficking and slavery, and we certainly saw this represented over the past 3 days. Having participated in these sessions and numerous conversations on the sideline of the conference, a number of key themes have emerged for us. The first is a sense that something really unique is taking place at this moment in time. From innovations in technology and database tools to combat trafficking, to supply chain and business practices to ensure slavery-free products, policy interventions, and treaty negotiations with foreign governments that demonstrate U.S. commitment to ending trafficking, to the ways in which folks on the left and on the right are coming together and transcending some of these issues that have traditionally divided us. Secondly, after one of our sessions, somebody said to me, "This is not your grandmother's human rights cause." I love that phrase. And now whether that's true or not, you should have met my grandmother. She was very active. I think the point is that there's a whole new group of philanthropists, many young and the next generation, that see slavery in a different frame from how perhaps previous generations framed the human trafficking and slavery cause. This is a group that's ready to flex some muscle not just through their philanthropic activity, but through consumer choices, their influences on brands, and engagement with entire commercial markets. And lastly, a theme that was absolutely dominant in all of our sessions and our conversations on the sidelines was this expressed interest among many to find ways to connect more often, work together more strategically, surface better deal flow for and among and between donors, and achieve more of a collective impact approach. Now, Jane, you'll be pleased to know that I stopped very short of announcing a special convening of the Global Philanthropy Forum in 2014 on slavery alone. However, I just want to challenge the GPF folks that this is an area that we need to solve for, and we need to respond to this interest in this work as it continues to grow very, very dramatically. Also, thank you. Also, let me just provide also my own shout out to the GPF team for their really kind, supportive, and thoughtful work to make our conversations as rich and as productive as they were. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. So Reeta Roy, president of the MasterCard Foundation, co-created and led the conversations on learning.
Thank you so much, Jane. And thank you to your fabulous team for providing so much support over the last 3 days and well before this conference. So we had 2 working group sessions, one about defining quality education, what it is, how do we recognize it, how do we measure it, and a second working group focusing on preparing the next generation of labor force. And I just have to call a shout out to my resource experts, Patrick Awa, Connor Bohan, Phil Nsengimana, who's the Minister of ICT and Youth of Rwanda, otherwise known as Phil, Hide Vandalier, Suzanne DiBianca, Janet Longmore, and Nalini Gangaharan. So I've distilled it down to 6 key takeaways for philanthropists. But before I tell you what they are, I want to really commend the panelists, but also the folks who came to our sessions. The conversations were thoughtful, they were candid. People shared not just about where they are now, but they shared about the journey. They shared about the setbacks, the times they had to go back to the drawing board and recreate what they thought they had achieved, but really reinvent. And so it's been a journey of learnings. Failure has been part of that journey to get us to this point. But most importantly, they were very, very practical. So here are the 6 takeaways when it comes down to working with young people about education, learning, and employment. First is we need to make sure that we take a very youth-centric approach. Listen, observe, appreciate, and engage young people in what it is we're doing. Keep them at the center of our focus in terms of the impact and the change that we want to see. Second, you cannot separate a quality education just in terms of academic knowledge, technical skills, character, values, integrity, dignity. That's part and parcel of what constitutes a quality education. Patrick Awa said it very beautifully. He said that development is the democratization of problem solving. And what we're doing in the area of education is we are nurturing, developing problem solvers. And achieving scale means educating more problem solvers. Third is about the role of technology. Technology is certainly an enabler, it's an enhancer, it's a platform, it's a connector, and absolutely the application of technology is a skill which is something every young person needs to acquire. Fourth is a very special role philanthropists have always played, and that is the role of experimentation. Philanthropy has always invested in visionary leaders who have had quirky, sometimes very strange ideas, but it's about taking those risks, investing in people, investing in their ideas, and being at the forefront of that change. And finally, the nirvana state, which we all talked about, which is scale. If we have a choice, go for the long term. If you have a better choice, go for depth. And remember that quality always trumps scale. So thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Now, another choice we have, particularly those who are able to, who find themselves in the spotlight, is to be the voice for the voiceless. And I just want to stop for a moment, Angélique, and say a word. As you know, Angélique Kidjo is a member of our strategic board of the Global Philanthropy Forum, and I've gotten to know her through that. But we also traveled to Chad together to meet with the victims of Darfur. And if you can make it through 4 days without a proper latrine, and around a lot of suffering with someone, and leave loving them even more than you loved them when you went, that person's pretty special. Angélique is a very special woman indeed. Everyone here knows her for her musicality, the power of her musicality. I know her for the power of her voice morally, socially, politically as well. And so we've asked Angélique if she would just share, a few words with us to give us a closing sense of what are the choices, a choice we can make with the voices we have. Would you like to take the podium, or would you like to do it from here? It's your choice.
I sit down for once.
Okay.
I'm not singing. I stand up when I sing.
Okay.
Well, I have to say that I'm the poster girl for the work that we all do here. I was born in Benin, one of the poorest countries in the world. In a poor household with 10 children, with one paycheck, which is my father's paycheck. And I was able to accomplish my dream, becoming a singer. And I got a Grammy and ended up playing at the Carnegie Hall. That's kind of impressive, right? So before we talk about the choices that we will make, I want to share with you how I get here. My parents, I always say that my father is my champion. My mom was a freak of health and sanitation. And my memory of vaccination is linked with UNICEF trucks. And I'll be going, I hide everywhere. As soon as I saw that truck, I'm like, no more needles in my butt or my arm. And my mom would find me all the time. And she has a booklet, and she will write every single. I'm like, Mom, why are you vaccinating me? Nobody in my school is vaccinated as much as I am. And she said, I don't care. If you're in good health, you can learn. Same thing for washing your hand. Every time you come out from outside, you don't wash your hand. She just look at you like this. There you go, all right, I get the message. You go wash your hand. You gotta wash yourself. She always say, if you have one dress, you have to clean it. It's not because you're poor that you're gonna look like a tramp outside. And both of them were educated. My mom was born in Pointe-Noire in Congo because my grandmother followed her husband that was working there. And they fought so hard for us, especially the 3 girls out of the 10 children. My father will stand against the whole family and the whole society. Doesn't matter how many times uncles, auntie, relatives come home and tell my father, what are you doing? Give your girls for early marriage. My father said, no, they are not merchandises. They have a brain, they can use it. They go to school, they have a future. And for me as a girl, I'm like, what is he talking about? Man, I'm not gonna let school, I'm not. And then finally I started making money at 6 years old, singing in my mom's theater group. And at 12, I turned to my father, I said, what's the point of me going to school? I'm making money, what the hell am I gonna go to do school? My father said, the deal is, you go to school, you get a degree, or you don't sing. That was not something that we can negotiate at all. So here you are having 2 parents that are committed to education, health, and a holistic approach to deal with the kids. My father, with one single paycheck, would give a tutoring, uniform, books, and access to good education. And also the vision of the world. My father, as a young man, travels to France. He had a scholarship to go to study in France. So when he came back, he always said to us, you have to think of the world bigger than your doorstep. You gotta be able to live in a world of challenges, of differences of culture, languages, belief, everything that is out there, you can fit in if you are educated enough to understand that what you believe in, other people believe in it, that you can disagree with people, but not within violence and hate. Hate is something that never had a chance in my home. And one thing also that my parents were able to do was allowed us to speak freely. For those who are Africans here, you know what it is when you're a child, you don't have the right to speak until they ask you to speak. My father had a different way to see it. He always said, you don't speak to me, I don't know what is in your brain. I can help you fix your problem. Speak out. What is wrong in school? What do you need? You don't talk to me, I don't know it. And when I become UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, we start campaigning for education. And every time you get to a school and you're asking a child, what do you want? The child don't speak. He's always looking up to an adult to be able to speak. And then suddenly I realized that I become the person that I am because my parents have given me all the opportunity and opened the door of the world to me. And the advocacy of educating goes beyond the family. My father and mother will go beyond to put other kids to school because we have a tradition in Benin and pretty much everywhere in Africa where parents from the village, they will bring the kids and they turn into slaves. They work, kid of 3, 4 years old, you see them in the market. You see those children working instead of going to school. And my mom and dad will stand against it and will send them to school, even though the parents specifically ask them, don't send my kid to school. So, also one thing that really struck me for me to become who I am today are the choices that my parents made. Tradition and modernity, how you balance both of them. My father respects the tradition, but never will go to a tradition that will hurt us. In my family where I come from, I should have 10 scarification in my face. And every child that was born, my father said, I will pay for the ceremony and I will give you a wooden doll. Your ceremony will happen, you do the scarification on the doll, not on my children. I'll give you another example. Female genital mutilation. I've been asked by the Italian mission at the UN to do a show in September last year and to invite all the ambassadors to be part of that show. Because the ambassador of Italy said, the ambassador, the African men, they are just tired of being lectured by the white people telling them what to do. So we want you to talk to them. I said, let's do that. I don't promise anything, I will do it. So when I get up on that stage, what did I tell them? My father was not from March. He was not an alien. He was an African man that believed that the life of his children were more important than any tradition. If my father was able to save us from wrongful and hurtful tradition, how can you all men sitting here tell me that African men, you can make a change? How cannot we make the decision that are right, not only for our children, but globally for our countries individually, and not take into account the interest of the outside versus the interest of the people? Because the problem in Africa today, we're talking about technology, we're talking about cell phone. They are giving numbers of people that have cell phone. No, each person have 4 cell phones. Because once again, making profit is more important than that tool that can help people get out of poverty. Because if you have one cell phone and you call other providers, it costs you more money. We think more about the profit that we make than empowering the people to become the part of the wealth that we have. Without social and human capital, economy won't happen, and democracy won't happen, capitalism will die. Think about what happened in 2008 in this crisis is crushing numbers and playing with people's lives that brought us to the brink that we are today. We have to think about philanthropy differently. The choices we have to make is how do we empower every single person in Africa, in developing country, to take lead in their own lives? What are the tools that we can bring out there that not only jeopardize the life of their children? You don't have to choose food versus the unit you put in the telephone. That's the problem we're having today. Land grabbing. There are so many problems that we have to deal with. We are building a house without a strong foundation. One of the things, when you were talking about slavery, child trafficking, what makes it so easy? When a child is born in Africa with no birth certificate, that child exists nowhere. It's like ghost. It's easy to smuggle out. What are we doing to help the African country make accountable every child that is born? How do we campaign with the leaders to make them realize the importance of birth certificate? Because once you finish primary education, when you want to go to the college, high school, you need a birth certificate. You don't have it, that's it. You can be the smarter person in the world. No one will get you there. So the choices we have to make is to go back again and start with fixing the house, because the house we are building is falling. It's not going to last long if you don't go back and do what it is to see the African people as human beings, not data. What is lacking in the goodwill of the world is the human connection, the emotion that have to go in there, not only going there for profit, not only thinking about helping African people in the way of profit all the time. The profit will be greater if each one of us in Africa can decide, okay, we want to buy this. It doesn't matter how much it costs, because we have the money, because we can afford it, and we are part of the global economy, not only the receivers, but the givers too. And the countries that are coming out, they say 27 out of 30 countries in Africa are building middle class. That evolution, is it going to be sustained for the next generation coming, or is going to collapse if we don't do the right choices? African philanthropy is a great thing. We have to get women involved in African philanthropy. Women of the market, because they are the one that knows exactly the reality, how it goes. So for me as an African person, I always think about philanthropy, helping people, by starting with the people themselves. They cannot just be numbers. It's impossible for us to move forward if we always keep on thinking about how much billions we can make out of Africa without the African people being empowered to be part of that benefits and that profits. People are more important than any money we can make. Thank you so much. Your turn.
I don't know, is it? To Jane.
Yeah. Well, the good news.
To you, I don't know.
The good news is she didn't sing, because then it really would be, it would be hard to follow, hard act to follow.
No, I don't want to sing and then crush everybody. Might do that at the end. I don't know yet. I'll give you guys the chance to talk first.
So Jamie Drummond, who has led the one campaign with Bono, has so much to teach us. They together have shown the power of listening first to those who may not see the world quite the way you do, have the same set of priorities, engaging in a respectful conversation, and advocating, and therefore advocating really effectively. What Jamie can show us is that when you make the choice to advocate armed with facts but deeply respectful of those who may not have the same point of view, real progress can be made. Mm-hmm. And so Jamie, talk to us about both what's happened and what you hope for going forward.
Thank you, Jane, and hello, GPF 2013. It's a great honor to be here on the stage with you, Jane, and these two, Angélique and Fred, and I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted also because, as an activist, you tend to be someone who gets angry about things, gets motivated through anger sometimes, and been doing this for a while, and it turns out there's some good news. And I'm delighted to be able to share it with you, and I venture to suggest that not all of us know all the good news that there is available to know. So I'm going to throw a few things out there which, as a result of innovative partnerships between philanthropists like yourselves, indeed many of you, the private sector, activists around the world, and politicians left and right, both sides also of the Atlantic, incredible results have been achieved. For example, on debt cancellation and some unusual friends we met along the way on Drop the Debt campaign, $110 billion of mainly African developing nation debt was cancelled over the last decade, which freed up $2 to $3 billion a year in debt service payments that were no longer paid. That money got redirected into healthcare and education, and amongst other things, while quality is still an issue, 50 million more children went to school in Africa in the last decade. Because of, well, a lot of people campaigned on that together. because of a similar campaign on HIV/AIDS, 8 million more people are on life-preserving antiretroviral drugs. It's the same kind of partnerships left and right and so on. On malaria, malarial death rates halved in countries across Africa. Vaccines, similar partnerships for immunizations. Hundreds of millions have been vaccinated, and 5.5 million fewer people died in the last decade because of these vaccinations. In fact, you add all this up, it's more than just sort of boutique, bijou, fantastic silos and cylinders of excellence in specific sectoral pieces. You add it all up and it adds more than the sum of its parts. For example, there's 10 countries in Africa which have had 100% debt cancellation, a tripling of aid. That's helped crowd in, along with better governance, a quadrupling of foreign investment, a near tenfold increase in domestic resources that have resulted in a halving of extreme poverty in those countries, a reduction by 30% in the number of children under 5 dying, and on the trajectory they're on, they'll have eliminated or virtually eliminated extreme poverty before 2030. So there's just this extraordinary scaled good news, while there's still huge challenges. There's great news to celebrate and to build upon. And indeed, around the world, we've halved extreme poverty in the last couple of decades. And every day, 14,000 fewer children are dying every day of preventable, treatable diseases. So these are kind of the pretty big successes that have been achieved by a lot of people working together in unusual partnerships. And I guess I've been lucky to be a part of many of these efforts and seen issues moved from the margins into the mainstream. And there's a few characteristics of these kind of campaigns which we've observed. And I'm constantly trying to boil down what these essential characteristics are, but currently I'm calling it the 3 M's, which is maneuvering, right? You've got to be prepared to maneuver on the inside of the political process, deal with both sides of the political aisle, present evidence-based policies. So, as you know, Bono or Bill Gates is meeting with the Chancellor in Germany, or the Finance Minister in the UK, or the President of the United States, or the head of a budget committee. You've just got to get there just at the right moment in the political process and present that brief dossier, that 2-page proposal on what a scalable idea is on antiretrovirals or malaria. But at the same time, you've got to mobilize people on the outside. So there's inside maneuvering and there's outside mobilization. It's not legitimate and it's not sustainable if people out there, the public, are not asking for it. So the public needs to be informed. And now it's easier to do that through social media and so on. You can build these constituencies more with greater facility to build the constituencies that kind of keep politicians honest and keep them doing the right thing. So that's the outside mobilization. But for scaled global responses to the big global challenges we face that we can tackle, you need multilateral responses. You can't just do it one country at a time. There was a brief moment in American foreign policy when I think the country felt you could do things alone. You can't. We need multilateral policies. So maneuvering on the inside, mobilizing on the outside, and multilateral policies. And I think if you can manage those pieces, you can move things along. And so how does some of this work in practice? I mean, there's lots of fun examples I could give you. We've had some interesting experiences, Bono and I, over the years with Pope John Paul II putting on his shades at a key moment in the political decision-making process. It was a highly strategic pop stunt, in a sense, with the Pope. There was the trip with Paul O'Neill, the Treasury Secretary at that time, with Chris Tucker, the comedian, and MTV and Bono, and that got tons of coverage, getting this issue of how we could help African leaders and citizens about a decade ago. That was quite a key moment. One interesting example is what we call nussling. So just after President Bush announced his historic AIDS initiative, a character called Jim Nussle, who was the Senate Budget Committee chair, said, "You know what? I know better than the president. The people of my district in Iowa do not care about Africa, and they do not care about the AIDS emergency in Africa. I know this." He said this publicly. He said the people of his constituency did not care. So plainly, we had to prove the gentleman wrong. So we organized the campaign with the Lutheran bishops in his district, with the Catholic priests, with the students in the college campus, and we got our friend Ashley Judd to record an ad for Christian radio. We spent $5,000 of 501c4 money, put the radio ad in the local Christian radio, and all these people of Jim Nussle's district politely contacted him and said, "Mate, you're wrong. We care about this stuff." He had cut $3 billion from the budget. He restored that money. And when he restored that money, he didn't just restore that money, he did not stop dead in its tracks an historic AIDS initiative that otherwise would not have gone forth. And not only was it an American issue at that time, we were also working with the Bundestag, with Number 10 Downing Street, with the Elysee across Europe, to try and get a multilateral response to the AIDS pandemic. Had Jim Nussle succeeded, the whole global effort would have been stopped in its tracks. So that $5,000 501c4 investment by that philanthropist was quite an effective use of philanthropist money, I would suggest. And I would suggest that you all think about those opportunities where you can help these kinds of efforts going forward. So, how might this kind of thing apply to some of the campaigns that you've all been discussing in the last couple of days? Well, there was a discussion this morning about healthcare. And also, how might it apply to Africa? Well, African leaders, as you all know, have made a promise to spend 15% of their budgets on healthcare. They made that promise a decade ago in Abuja, the Abuja Declaration. Had African leaders kept those promises to their citizens, $100 billion more would have been spent on African health systems in the last decade. But there was not an at-scale funded campaign on the continent to make sure that African leaders kept their promises. As a result, there's been $100 billion less investment in healthcare in Africa. What if there was someone doing something like a Jim Nussle campaign, but with the focus on some of those African policymakers? You've been talking a lot about agriculture, and Heather and the gang. And okay, there's the Maputo Declaration. African leaders promised to their citizens they would spend 10% of their budgets on agriculture. Only 4 countries in Africa are doing that. The annual underspend as a result of shortfalls in agriculture spending is about $4 billion a year in sub-Saharan Africa. That is about the same amount of money as the international community gives to Africa in aid to agriculture. So if there had been a campaign to make sure these promises were kept, imagine what would have happened. Well, very specifically, I'm being all macro here, let's get micro. I don't know is One Acre Fund, is Stephanie still here from the One Acre Fund? Anyway, she's been around the last couple of days. And all of you, I'm sure, who are interested in agriculture have bought and read Roger Thoreau's book, The Last Hunger Season. In it, he talks about the One Acre Fund and their very effective, microdoses of fertilizer, advice, credit, support, seeds for small farmers in Kenya and now across East Africa. He talks about the Piketty family who've increased yields from, I think it's 2 bags of maize, 90-kilogram bags of maize a year to 10 to bags. And this has transformed the Piketty family's future and their village and their region. But if there was a campaign to make sure that the Kenyan government kept its promise to invest in agriculture, that would have taken the very specific excellence of the One Acre Fund's experience to scale across the continent, doing it so through transparent budgets so the small farmers can trace the money and make sure it's getting through to a local level. And so I put it to you that this is the kind of at-scale global advocacy that I think can also be adapted and implemented, hopefully maybe through the African Philanthropy Forum as that evolves. And I'd say that, if this kind of thing could be explored and implemented, you could definitely accelerate the end of extreme hunger, the end of extreme poverty. And put the 21st century on a much better track. And I think that choice and that decision is absolutely in this room for us to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Jamie, if you have a PowerPoint with the bullets of the success stories, we'd love to put that on the GPF website so that everybody can look back at those statistics and see what's already been done, so we have a sense, be really heartened to what could be done. You've taken us squarely to the issue of leadership, and of course ethical leadership is at the heart of choice. Fred Swaniker has devoted his career to building leadership, advancing leadership. He founded and runs something called the Africa Leadership Academy, and so we end with Fred's thoughts.
Thank you. If you won't mind, I'll use the podium.
Go ahead, buddy.
So we've come to the end of yet another conference. We met many interesting people over the world, from throughout the world. And we listened to inspiring talks by people doing courageous things to tackle some of the world's greatest challenges. Challenges like modern-day slavery, how we will feed 7 billion people, building state capacity, healthcare, impact investing, and of course, education. If you're like me, you were moved by what you heard. You were outraged by some of the injustice that you learned about. And you became excited by the possibilities of what is being done to address some of these challenges. So what do we do now? Over the course of the last 3 days, if you're like me, you would have experienced a certain feeling. The best description I've ever heard of this feeling is as a moment of obligation. The first time I heard of this concept of a moment of obligation was in 2006. I was being interviewed for a grant by an organization called Echoing Green that supports very early stage social entrepreneurs. And they said to me, so Fred, tell us, what was your moment of obligation? And I talked about that moment in 2004 when I knew I had to leave my job with McKinsey and pay them back $124,000 for the money they had just spent to send me to Stanford for my MBA. I left because I had a dream that had been keeping me up at night. And this was a dream to tackle what I saw was one of the biggest challenges facing Africa, and that was the lack of effective leadership. And so that fateful moment, when I called McKinsey, without having a clue as where I was going to get that money to pay them back, and said, I'm not coming back. I'm going to do this thing. And so began my journey to launch the African Leadership Academy. And today, $50 million later, we have 600 young leaders under development, and on our goal and we're well on our way to develop thousands more to bring transformative change to Africa. And this has been my calling for the last 10 years. I'm so grateful that I listened to my heart. Now, throughout our lives, we go through these moments of obligation. They're normally caused by one of two things. The first cause is outrage. We see some injustice, some cruelty, some unfairness in the world, and we want to do something about it. The second cause is excitement about an opportunity. And very often these opportunities arise when the world is changing. So this must have been the way that Bill Gates felt when he was 19 and the microcomputer was invented and he realized that a revolution was about to take place. And he decided to quit Harvard to start Microsoft. This was the feeling that Strive and Tsitsi Masiyiwa must have felt when they saw the opportunity to launch the first mobile phone company in Zimbabwe, as Tsitsi mentioned yesterday. Whenever we face these moments of obligation, we're faced with a choice. Do we act on it, or do we walk away and leave it for someone else to tackle? In my work to develop Africa's future leaders, I've come to believe that great leaders are those who are able to make very wise choices when they're faced with these moments of obligation. Specifically, I believe that great leaders do one thing in common. They ignore 99% of these moments of obligation that tug at their hearts. Why does this habit make leaders great? You see, I believe that we've all been put on earth to fulfill a destiny. And most of the moments of obligation we experience don't actually fall within our destiny. There are other leaders whose destiny it is to tackle these problems. And every minute that we may be spending tackling a problem that is not our destiny, it's time we're taking away from doing what we should be doing. And so we need to ignore most of those moments. But every now and then, in that 1% of the time, it is our time to step up and to act. It is our time to follow that tug that we feel in our heart and to chase the excitement of the solution to that seemingly intractable problem that we see. In that 1% of the time, the world needs us to invest our hearts, our minds, our resources, and our time to make it happen. Pythagoras captured this nicely when he said, choices are the hinges of destiny. So how in a world that is constantly exposing you to these moments of obligation, especially at a conference like this one, or when your full-time job is as a philanthropist or as an executive in a foundation, when you're constantly being bombarded with opportunities to make a difference, how do you choose what to get involved in and what to pass? Today, I want to offer you a guide, a roadmap for making these choices that we must all make. It is what I have used as a compass each and every time that I've come at a crossroads in my life, where I've needed to decide whether to walk away or whether to make this my life's work. I ask myself 3 questions. The first question, is it big enough? We have too many talents, too many resources to be wasting time solving small problems. The world needs us to tackle its biggest problems. The second question I ask, is there passion? I call this the sleepless night test. So does the issue at hand excite you so much that you can't stop talking about it? That you can't sleep at night because you're so outraged or so energized by it? And then the third question I ask is, am I uniquely positioned? Of all the people in the world, am I one of the best prepared to tackle this opportunity? Are there certain things that have happened in my life that have been preparing me for this moment that I didn't necessarily know I was being prepared for, that make me uniquely qualified to make this happen? Now, over the last 3 days, I've met several examples of leaders who are fulfilling their destiny because their work is at the intersection of these 3 questions. For example, I have no doubt that Reeta Roy is fulfilling her destiny. Let's ask those 3 questions of her. Question 1, is her issue big enough? Reeta's main issue, as most of you know, is education in Africa. This is a huge problem. Today, about 75% of children who should be enrolled in primary school in Africa are actually enrolled in primary school. When you go to secondary school, that number drops to about 35%.
Absolutely.
When you go to the tertiary level, only 4% of young people in Africa who should be enrolled in tertiary education are actually in universities and colleges. So it's a big problem that she's decided to focus on. Making a commitment to invest $500 million in scholarships for higher education and the best universities in the world for African students. That's big. So she definitely ticks that box for me. Does she have passion for the cause? Is she having sleepless nights thinking about this? You can see the passion in Reeta's eyes, and it's infected everyone in her staff. I bet you Reeta has sleepless nights. Now, Reeta, I'm not just saying this because I can see bags under your eyes.
Thanks for saying that.
But on a serious note, no one can meet Reeta and not see that she's excited by her work. She's basically bouncing off the walls because she sees the possibilities for change in Africa as a result of the problem that she's tackling. So is she uniquely positioned? The third question. For those of you who don't know, Reeta grew up in Malaysia in a family of fairly modest means, but wanted to come to the US for college. Reeta had an experience in her life where someone gave her a scholarship to come to university in the US, a small liberal arts college. And so she has personally felt the impact of a scholarship and changing the trajectory of a young person's life. And then she went on to a very great career managing corporate foundations in pharmaceutical companies like Abbott Laboratories and so forth. So when she got the call that day from MasterCard to run this foundation, she had a moment of obligation. And she thought back on all of those things that had happened to her over the course of her life. Some of them had happened by chance. Some of them had happened by choice. And she connected the dots and realized that all that experience in working in the foundations and being given a scholarship when she was a young person was preparing her for this role. And she realized that of all the people in the world who could lead this bold initiative, few people were as prepared as she was. And so she stepped up and made a choice to act. And the rest is history. Is Toyin Sairaki fulfilling her destiny as a leader in philanthropy? Let's take her through those 3 questions as well.
Yeah.
Is her issue big enough? We heard yesterday about how she's made a choice to focus on maternal health in Nigeria. That's a huge problem. In 2010 alone, an estimated 40,000 Nigerian women died in childbirth. The country accounts for an estimated 14% of maternal deaths worldwide. And Nigeria remains one of the 10 most dangerous countries in the world for a woman to give birth. So she's definitely tackling a big issue. Is she passionate? Anyone listening to her yesterday on the stage could not have walked away believing that she wasn't passionate about the issue. She's so passionate that she's willing to risk embarrassment on national television by doing bold stunts for this cause that she so deeply believes in, like she talked about yesterday. Is she uniquely positioned, better than most people in the world, to tackle this issue? Let's think about that one. How many people in Nigeria are fortunate to have been born into a family, which is a very successful family of industrialists, to have married into a political family? And so that positioned her uniquely to have the resources and also the influence to tackle this very big issue. But more importantly, yesterday, we listened to a heart-wrenching story of childbirth, as she lost one of her twins personally due to the shocking state of healthcare for mothers in Nigeria. While it was a very traumatic experience that we wouldn't want to wish on anyone, it was preparing her to do what she's doing now. How many people in the world do you think have that unique combination of resources, influence, and a deep, deep understanding of the challenges of maternal health in Nigeria, as Toyin Sairaki does? And so when she got that moment of obligation, faced with a choice to do something about maternal health, and she made the choice to step up, that was her 1% moment. And now she's fulfilling her destiny as a leader. So it's magical when these 3 things come together. You can just see it in these leaders. They're on fire. And when they're that fired up, nothing can stop them until they achieve their cause. And that, in my opinion, is one of the hallmarks of great leadership. In closing, I'll end with a wish for all of you. As you leave here today, think back on all the challenges, causes, and possibilities that you've been exposed to over the last few days. Think about the choices that you must now make, about which one of these to be involved in, and which one of these to leave. If they don't tick these 3 boxes, are they big enough? Are you really passionate about it? And are you truly the best placed, due to the prior experiences you've had in your life, to tackle that issue?
Don't know.
If they don't fit that mold, then walk away. But for that 1% of the time, when the answer to these 3 questions is a resounding yes, then don't let your destiny as a leader pass you by. Step up and make the right choice. Follow your destiny as a leader. May you have sleepless nights.
Yeah. You have something to say?
So Angélique, surprise me.
Oh, Lord, don't bring that up. Jesus Christ. Okay. Well. There are great people in this room, and I only spent 2 days, yesterday and today, and I've seen, that won't work for me. I don't do SM58, that killed my voice. I just always feel thankful for anyone that consider doing anything for any other human being that is in need. And I used to say, when a woman cry, hurt somewhere, I'm hurt. When any human being in this planet is hurt, I'm hurt. And that compassion and empathy, and if you lose it, nothing that we do will make any sense. And I'm glad that I've came and see some of my sisters very strong. And we have to speak up for ourselves, we African women, because we have power. Let's unleash that power in the world. Okay? So I'm gonna sing for you a thanking song, basically, to thank you all for coming from wherever, how far you have traveled to be here. And I wish everybody to go back home safe and to get their hand, their brain, their body, their soul to work to change this world of ours, because this world is beautiful and we all deserve to have a decent life. So the song goes like this. Blewe, blewe, blewe mianda pelo, blewe mianda pelo, blewe, blewe, blewe. Blewe mianda pelo, blewe mianda pelo, blewe. Daga po manyona zonlio, blewe blewe po manyona zonlio, la doa si bebe da tata, blewe. Ma u se gomiere ya kwena mia gomenya. Tigbe sine miri ya kwe na mia gomenya o. Mina unjo, mi dogbera, mina unjo, mi dogbera. Bueno kaka mia poase kwe benyo, bueno kaka mia poase kwe benyo. Ble uye mianda kwelo, ble uye mianda kwelo. Bleu.
Ooh. That was just beautiful.
I didn't want to sing. I don't. Thanks for doing what you do. That's all that matters. Me singing the cherry on top of the cake.
And with that, this year's Global Philanthropy Forum comes to a close. Thank you. That was